fairy tales and stories from all over the world. The first one from Africa. The creator of the world, the big spirit, from which all life came, had posed two of his favorite people on earth and gave them two husbands, two wives, Rakora or Avwa. One day, these two favorite people, they disappeared, and their wives seeked them, but they couldn't find them. And so they asked God for help, and the big spirit helped them by letting every living thing on earth go around and seek them here and there. The stones, the trees, the water, everything living and non-living, they went out searching for them all over the place. But then nobody could find them. And so God said to everyone to stop. Every human, every stone, every animal, every tree, even the water had to stop and seek where they are now. But then the stones had been so far into the earth, and there God ordered them to stop, every one of them. The many animals that had been around looking everywhere had to stay where they were, and so the snakes and the worms and every living thing. Also the trees had dig with their roots down to look for these two disappeared favorite humans, but no one could find them, and so they got stuck, everyone in his place. And that's why you today find many humans, many animals, many trees, and all of the living things scattered all over the earth. They came so far, but then the big suspicion fell on the water, that the water has taken them, and so God said to this water, you will never find rest. You will keep moving day and night with no rest and no sleep. But the waters then accused the winds and said, the wind was raving so hard and harsh that we could not get any rest. And so they are accomplices. They have also some guilt. And then this big spirit of God turned to the winds and saw that they were transformed into birds. And so when the wind is raging, many birds are not flying. And when the birds are flying, the winds are moving slowly or stopping, hiding somewhere between earth and heavens. And the birds saw what happened to these two humans. They disappeared, and then they got their reward by becoming the birds watching over what's going on earth. So all birds are scattered around the earth to be watching forever over the humans. This story from Africa is very simple in many ways, but still giving the inspiration to the fantasy of the kid. And many times kids and adventures, they belong together. They are like two pairs walking around earth, watching and seeing and traveling in it in ways that we others can't. That's why stories and fairy tales are like blossoming roses in our minds and hearts, taking our minds off the reality for some time, giving us some solace in the need of our hardest and maybe loneliest times. And that's why they are important to tell. They have been told from generation to generation. And let's now turn to one from Egypt. The Egyptians loved these kind of stories and told them generations after another. This story from Egypt is told by a man who experienced it in his lifetime. He was out on the ship in the Red Sea with many strong men and workers, and then they went into a sudden storm that arose from the heavy winds that had been arising angrily around them. They didn't know where the wind came from or how the storms came to be, why the sea had made this very huge effort to pour their little ship down into its stomach and swallow it. But so it did. And this poor guy, was the only survivor. And so he was washed up on the shores of a sea. and he thought he was home, but when he looked, he was on an island. And from that sea to that island, he looked, and he saw none. And so he waited, and on that island, he saw everything that he wanted. There was of everything that he liked, but there was no one to talk to. Then a snake appeared with a golden head and bronzish eyes, and very special because it could speak. And it spoke to him, and he told her his story. And he said that they were out on the sea, working hard, everyone with his eyes open for the storms and the winds, not to overrule them, but they were taken by surprise. And so they all drowned, but he washed up there. And the snake comforted him and said, "Why have you washed up here? You should go back to your place." And he agreed, but he couldn't. And the snake helped him by letting a ship passing by in several months pick him up. And so this man went back to his home on the mainland and told his story on how the winds and the sea had gotten angry and tried to take them down. And so everybody cheered for him surviving this harsh times. And he kept the story about the snake for himself because he thought nobody would believe him that he met such an animal on that island. And so sometimes it's very important to tell your story and repeat it and repeat what's happening to you, reminding yourself that the winds and the seas can get so angry that they can overpower man's cleverness and ability to sail on them. But it's also all right to keep some of what you have seen and known as a secret to yourself. And this is a story from India, a small story about the sun, the moon, the wind who went to dinner. One day, the sun, the wind, and the moon were invited by their uncle and aunt, the lightning and the thunder, to go and dine with them. And so they left their mother, the big star on the black sky, and they went to dine. And she was waiting anxiously for her kids to get home. But the night went on, and the sun and the wind were so happy about the party that they forgot everything about their shining mother in the sky, and they didn't go home before very, very late, not remembering her by any of the goods that they were invited to. And so when they come home, and she had waited the whole night, and she said with a tired eye after a long night, "Ah, children, what have you brought home to me?" And so the son said, "I have nothing. I was out there having real good time with everyone out there." And the wind said, "I didn't get anything either. I couldn't wait to have all this happy time, so I didn't really think of getting a lot of things with me home. I went there for my pleasure alone." But then the moon said, "Bring mum anything to put these goods in. Look what I have brought you." And so the moon shook his hands and put out the best of the best of what they had been invited to. Never has been seen like it, saved and well placed. And so that mother star turned to the sun and said, "Because you went out to have fun with your friends and forgot your mother, you will be having heat waves to burn everyone who touches you. And if you keep shining all the time, people will hate you and they will cover their heads when they see you. And that's why the sun can be so hot every day on our heads." And she turned to the wind and said, "You too, you forgot your mom because of your own pleasures. Now you listen what's gonna happen. You're gonna have the blowing winds in hot, dry weather and make everything shrink. And you're gonna blow and blow until people go and find shelter from you. And the humans will hate you and run away from you forever." And that's why the wind is always so unpleasant when it blows so hard. But the moon had done the things that she loved, and she said, "You remembered your mother, my daughter, and some of it was from your own mouth. So, from now on, you will be mild and clear, and nothing burning in you but the brightest of light, and humans will call you the blessed, and keep looking upon your shining face and love you forever." And from there, the moon has been shining until this day in a mild and nice and attractive way. And this is a story from Japan. In Japan, nights can be cold, and so the carpets are very important to cover yourself with. And this man had a small place where he housed people that came passing by. And one night he had a guest sleeping in that guest room. And so at night, when the guest had put himself to rest after a fine meal and a good talk, he wanted to sleep, but then he heard a voice. The voice was calling, "Brother, are you freezing?" Little brother answered, "I am. Are you freezing too?" And then he woke up and looked around, but there was none. He thought the voices came from outside, so he went to rest again. But not soon after, he heard the voice again. "Big brother, are you freezing?" "No, are you, my little brother?" And then he looked around again, and again he couldn't see anything. So he went to the owner of the home and woke him up and asked if he heard anything, but no one had heard anything. And so he went on his journey next day as if nothing had happened. But the owner of the house was a bit worried what the voices were and where they came from. And so later another bypasser came and had to sleep there at night. And so he did. And after a fine meal and a good talk, he went to lay down. And he heard the voices, the big brother, saying, "Are you freezing?" And the other one said, "No, brother, I am okay. Are you freezing?" And so this man woke up at night, and he was so scared that he immediately went and woke up the people in the home and told them that he had been hearing voices. What is this? And so they came and they talked, and he said, "This is not normal. First, the first guest heard voices, and now the second one." And then he went to sleep in that night, at that night in the room, awaiting to hear the voices. And so he did. When he laid himself to rest, that owner of the home, he heard the voices. "Brother, are you freezing?" "I am okay, I'm okay, brother. Are you freezing?" And so he was awakened by this, and he looked thoroughly and deeply, but there was no one. He looked outside and inside, but still he could hear the voices. And then he realized that the voices were coming from the carpets, and they were coming from beneath it. And so he went to the man who had sold him these carpets and told him what had happened. And the man told him the story, the very sad story, that once a rude man came to sell these carpets to him, and these carpets has been remembering the story of that poor family forever. It was a family that only had little, and they lived in the mountains. And so when the father died, the mother followed him soon after, and that evil man who had been renting them a house wanted his payment, but the brothers could not do anything but sell everything out, so they were left only with these carpets in the end. And so they lay there sleeping beneath that carpet, having to freeze when one had held the carpet to his side and the other took it to the other side. And so from there, the carpet learned that they were freezing, but trying to protect each other and give each other time to get warm under the carpet. "What happened to them?" asked the owner of the home. "Well, they were driven out of that house the next day by this evil man, and they went wandering about in the streets until they found the temple of Kwannon. That's the goddess of mercy. And there, beside the temple, like so many others, They lay down and slept, and the sleep took them and swept them in its white and nice cover, so nobody ever saw them again. And the owner didn't know what to do with the carpets, and the shop owner told him to give it to someone in that temple. And when they did so, the carpets finally rested, and nobody heard the carpets speaking ever again. This story is from Russia, from the Siberian Peninsula, about a Rusalka girl and a very mistreated boy. One day in the hard winter, a woman from the Cossacks came to a small village near the river of Jena, and there she gave birth to a son, but died soon after. Nobody knew what to do with that little child, so they baptized him, and then they let him live among them. But he was really mistreated. Nobody really liked him, and so every day he got shouted at, and he got thrown out of the homes, and he got ordered to do a lot of stuff that made him suffer and become tired. And so day after day, as he grew up, he used to go down to the small river, sitting there, complaining his inner thoughts and sufferings, talking to the water. And then one day, he fell asleep there by the side of the waters streaming by with their sounds. And when he woke up, there was a girl a few years elder than him beside him. He didn't know where she came from, but she was very strange. She had around her head a small pearl, uh, and she had on her head pearls, and she had around her neck some shining and very beautiful stones, and everything in her was like the moonlight shining out of her. And so he was very taken in, and she talked to him and said, "Are you feeling fine?" And he said, "Where did you come from?" She said, "Don't worry, I will make your life better." "No one can make my life better," says. "But yes, I can. Give me your hand." And so she took him by the hand, rubbed it, and then blew some winds in it. And she said to him, "Go home, and from now on, you will see how everybody will be treating you well and things will go fine for you. Are you sure? Where, how can I trust this?" he said. And she said, "Just do what I'm telling you and you will see. Go home and see." And when he went home to these people who have been mistreating him and didn't really like him, he was very at odds with himself, said this will never work. But then when he came in, he saw a gentle face that was very friendly to him. And the man in the house was much more friendly than he used to. Nobody beat him, nobody shouted at him, and they asked him to come and sit and eat with them at dinner. And so everything had really changed. And when he went out in the small village, people were keen to be liking him and looking at him with mild eyes, inviting him to things he liked. And his life changed. And so he went back to the river, awaiting for the girl to come, but she wouldn't. But then one day, while sitting there longing to see her again, he fell asleep, happy and joyful, wanting to thank her. And then she showed up again, and she stood beside him there. From there, he saw her and talked to her again. And he wanted to know everything about her and why she had helped him. And she said, "Well, I am one of these kids who were killed when I was small, thrown out in this river before I could get any life because they were afraid they couldn't have me." And so he got scared. He said, "Are you one of these unbaptized children who are part of the Rusalka?" It means people outside the law or the blessings. And she said, "Yes, I am. But is that a problem for you?" "Of course it is." And so he threw himself away from her, took out his cross and put it in front of her face to protect himself. But she was unaffected by that, just telling him that she's the same girl that has been there for him before. But he couldn't really realize that. And so he turned away from her and ran back to the village. Then one day, long time after, while they were walking beside that river, a beautiful girl, a few years older than he, called Isidora, was drowning. She was the son of a wealthy man nearby that this kid liked very much, and he threw himself into the water to help her, but he almost drowned with her. Then, all of a sudden, two hands came out of the water and helped him grab her, and these hands grabbed both him and her and led them to the shore. By leading them to the shore, they came out and they found feet under the ground. And when he looked back at the river, he saw that girl that had helped him before. And he asked her to wait because he wanted to talk to her, but she didn't want to talk anymore. And she left him and went on her own, disappeared in the waters again. And so he went with Isadora, the girl that he liked, and he got a big reward, and everything fell out in a fine way for him. But then, forever after that he lived and grew, he came down to that river and sat by it, waiting for this blessed girl to show up as she had shown up before. And so she did from time to time show up and speak to him and tell him that he will be fine in all his manners the rest of his life. But she never again went up to the shore to sit beside him, just stayed away, and he never forgot her. Forever he came down to that river from time to time to sit, hoping that she will show again. Humans like to tell stories, and that's what we actually are. We are a story, each one of us, a unique, special story that resembles many other people's lives, but are in some ways also special, at least the way we feel. It may be so that I have the same story like thousands others, and you can have a story that resembles hundreds of people. But in your experience, you are unique and special to yourself and the way you are. And so when we go back in history, we see that stories have been told for humans in order to make them understand their life and the way they are. They're also there to make life easier for us, because when we tell a story, we start relating and understanding, knowing what it is of a life that we have or had. It's also a way shedding light on our thoughts and fantasies, the big dreams that we never reach, and the obstacles that are in our way, that evil that we want to fight. That's why stories are not told to show us and show the kids that there are monsters, but it is so we could know and learn that these monsters can be fought and killed. And that's why stories have mattered since the beginning of the human life. And you find them in every culture and every religion in different ways and shapes. Some of them are very primitive, like if you go to the very old stories from the Arctic, Siberian, and African areas. But some of them are also very deep and profound, especially if they have been developed to fit the human life and the way people are going about. Here's a story from Thousand and One Nights Adventures, which is the biggest gathering of moralistic and fantasy stories that have been found in history. And it's a story about a friend who goes on a travel, leaving his money in a jar of olives. Hidden behind these olives, he leave it in the custody of his good friend. And so when he comes back several years later, and at that time it took him sometimes years to travel and get back, he came back to his friend and took his olive jar home and found that there was no money left. And so he complained to the local judge and told him, I think my friend here, he stole the money because nobody else knew about the jar and I had it in his custody for these years. And the friend, he put on a mask of being offended and said to him, well, that's not true. This is the jar you gave me and this is the jar you're getting back. There was nothing in it. I never opened it and I don't know anything about it. And so the friend could not really realize how he could um, convince the judge that his money was stolen. And so he went back home empty handed. And everybody started talking about this story. Even kids in the street made it as a play. And so one time this judge was walking by, and the story reached all the way up to the Sultan or the Caliph, who was the leader of everyone. And so he wanted to solve this mystery, but nobody could. And one day this judge was walking by a group of kids, and so he saw they were acting like these two friends. One had the jar, and the others played the friend who kept it. And so he stopped by and looked at the play that these kids had been showing on the streets. And he saw that, well, he gave him the jar, asked him to take care of it, and left. And that friend, he opened the jar, changed the olives, and took the money out, closed it, sealed it again, and left it there for his friend to come back. And when he came back, he gave it to him. There was no money in it, just like the real story. But then they went to this judge, a little boy called Sulaiman. And he sat there with his friends. And he said, okay, bring me two experts on olives. And so two kids came forward, playing the roles of experts. And he asked them, how long can olives stay fresh? And they said, well, 2-3 years at the max, maybe 4, but not more. And so he said, let's open this jar. And when he opened it, he saw that it was very fresh olives. So he called back the friends and said, how could you say you never opened this with this jar been left in your custody for so many years? The olives would have been gone bad, and how fresh they are. And then this friend was exposed, and he had to admit that he took the money. And so the tradesman who had been traveling got his money back. And when the judge saw this, he suddenly realized that this kid has solved the mystery that he couldn't. And he called upon the big leader to see the act, and he saw it. And then they called forward the two friends that had had this trouble. And so he gave him back the jar of olives, and he admitted that he had taken the money.